we're gonna finish our beef pot roast. Mashed potatoes, and then sauteed asparagus, mushrooms, and onions. And then we're gonna make a gravy using the juices from our pot roast. So right now I've had my pot roast baking in the oven for the last, I wanna say 2+ hours. So that it will be nice and tender. It was about a 3-pound chuck roast that I kind of cut up into good sized chunks, and first I sauteed up an onion and some garlic, and then I seared off the sides of my chuck roast, so that it would get a nice skin on it. And then I added in some beef broth, rosemary, bay leaves, onion powder, pepper, and garlic salt. And it's been stewing in those juices for the last, few hours, so it's nice and tender. And that beef broth that we added, it was about 3 cups, will make a perfect, delicious gravy as well. So we have that in the oven right now. Oh, and we're gonna bake up one of my quick hollow loaves that I've prepped up. So I have that proofing in the oven, and we'll give it a nice coat of egg wash and bake that here in a second. But we're gonna peel up our potatoes right now so we can make some nice fluffy mashed potatoes. So these are your good old russet potatoes. I find russets make the best, fluffiest mashed potatoes because they're not as, I wanna say, thick and starchy as like a Yukon. A Yukon makes a really sticky mashed potato, where russets are very, very fluffy. So I've got 5 good sized potatoes here, although I might not use all 5. I'm gonna peel up 4 and then I'll see where it gets me, because these are pretty huge. And then we'll get those boiling, and then we can start prepping up our onions to start caramelizing for our sauteed mushrooms, onions, and asparagus. But kind of a meal that is delicious, but you do a little bit of the prep a couple hours beforehand, so it's kind of nice. I can have a great meal on a pretty busy sport night. Okay, so I've got these 4 potatoes peeled up. I'll see, I'm not sure if I'm gonna need them, the 5th one yet, but I'll just see how, when I cut it up and cube it, we'll see. I'm gonna try to make sure I cube up my potatoes all roughly the same size. And I'm gonna do them, fairly smaller so that they can cook up quickly. With russet potatoes, you do have to be careful when cooking them, because if you cook them too long, they'll completely disintegrate. So making sure you cut them the same size, and then just keep a careful eye on cooking them, will lead them to be perfectly cooked, where you can get a really fluffy and delicious mashed potato. There we go. And then we'll start dropping these in our water. We'll add just a little bit of salt to it as well. There we go. And then once I get this one cut up, I'm going to start dropping them in our water so they can start kind of cooking here. Get myself a little bit more room. So I think I'll be good with 4. So I've got my water over here, just coming up to a boil. And we get those in there. Once we get our next round of potatoes in, I will add a little bit of salt. Now, normally I don't salt the water, but I may use a little bit of this starchy water to make my gravy, depending if I need to dilute any of the drippings. And so I like to have that option. A lot of times I typically just salt my potatoes when I'm whipping them with the butter and the cream. But today I'm gonna add just a little bit so I have some good starchy water if I need it. Here we go. And we'll get these in there. I don't feel like I've done mashed potatoes in a while. It's one of those where half my family absolutely loves mashed potatoes, and then Evie and Teddy, although Teddy I think is coming around to him, but Evie does not like potatoes in any form. She doesn't even really like French fries. The only potato form she likes is a salt and vinegar chip. Okay, let's get these last ones in. And then, when you throw your water in there, you see you get this kind of cloudiness. That's the potato starch. What I like to do is once I have all of my potatoes in, I kind of pour off this top layer. That's gonna give me a fluffier mashed potato and not as sticky. So I'm gonna give it a stir, and then we'll pour off a little bit of this liquid that has a bit of that starch accumulated at the top. Okay. Now we're just gonna pour off just about a cup. There we go. And that's gonna give us, just again, a fluffier mashed potato. We're gonna bring this up. Looks like I got a potato skin. That's okay. Okay. Let's get our onions diced, or sliced. I'm gonna do them long and skinny because my asparagus is gonna be long. So let's get them sliced and sauteing for our asparagus and our mushrooms. Here we go. So I'm going to take off this whole kind of top layer here. And then we're going to cut it in half. And we're going to do some nice kind of skinny onion. Kind of similar how when I do my caramelized onions and carrots. But because my asparagus is long, I want to keep my onions long as well. And then, before we add them in, we're going to cook these. I normally don't cook in butter, but I'm running low on my olive oil, so we're going to do butter because it's delicious. We're going to put in about a tablespoon here. And we're going to let it melt, and then we'll throw in our onions and let those start to caramelize. So I've got it heating up over around like a 6 with butter. You have to be a bit more careful when you're cooking with it because the milk solids in it can burn. So you want to do more of a medium heat with butter versus a high heat. Once we get a good kind of base on my pan, there we go. We can start throwing in our onions. We're just going to help break them apart. There we go. Let me wash my hands. And let's get our, see, I'm going to turn this up just a smidge higher. Wait on that 1 second. I'm going to actually prep our asparagus and then we can get our challah going. So with asparagus, you don't want to just cook them up as you are. This bottom inch or so is going to be really chewy and fibrous. So you want to make sure you cut that off. Typically, you always know where to cut is because it's going to be kind of a whitish color. But even if you have ones that are all green all the way down, still take off about an inch of that so that you have a lovely tender asparagus. There we go. Let's see. Trying to line them all up to where we're going to have the good stuff. Now, typically my favorite asparagus are the skinnier ones, but I do buy what's on sale. And if it's the big fat ones on sale, then that's what I get. Now, in Germany, they have white asparagus, which is just because it's just grown like in a dark area, so it doesn't get as much sunlight. And the German word for asparagus is Spargel. I don't know why. I remember that from all of my German, but I just always like, you get it there, and most of the time you get it, it's in a jar. They'll have it jarred, but you can of course buy it fresh. But I don't know why, that's something I vaguely remember from my foreign exchange in Germany or whatnot. But asparagus is lovely. I'm going to toss my onions here with the butter. Then I'm going to take out my loaf that I have proofing in the oven here. And we will brush that with a little egg wash mixture, and we'll have that start to bake up at around 400 for about 15 minutes. There we go. Okay, let's get this guy out. So this is my quick challah loaf, which I love. I literally prepped this up like 45 minutes ago to an hour, not even that long. That's the beauty of it. I hope we didn't stick too much to it, so I've got to be a little bit careful pulling this up on here. There we go. So the trick with this to get a nice quick rise fast is I used a whole tablespoon of yeast in this loaf, which makes it so soft and fluffy, but it takes out the need to do that extra long wait between your proofing, you know, where you punch it down after about an hour and a half and then you shape it again. Here, I literally let it proof for about 15 minutes the first time. Then I made 4 long ropes, and that's how you get the really intricate, the fun looking braid. It's not 3, it's 4. And then you kind of weave them together and let it rise. This has been rising for about like 30 minutes, so not very long. I turn this down just a smidge.
You have a question? Do you have a recipe card for the challah bread?
I do. I have the quick challah was a recipe card I made for everybody, so that one's available. You'll just have to go to the link and do some digging for it. But I do have that recipe card available for everyone. Now, every week I do send out about 3 recipe cards from meal or things we cook during the week for my members. And every so often I send out a free recipe card for everybody. And this, because this is such a popular one, I have this one nice and ready for it. I'm going to turn my potatoes down because they got a good boil, and I'm going to add a little bit of salt now. So just a good, you know, pinch or 2 over that. And now I've mixed a little bit of water into my egg, and this is going to give our challah a nice kind of shiny color to it when we bake it up. And I kept it just a plain loaf today. Now the challah recipe that I have for everyone is for when I make my really big loaf, which is about, you can either make 2 loaves this size with it, or you can make one like 16 braid loaf where you have lots of braids in it. It's a really intricate basket weave. So for a smaller loaf like that, just half that main recipe. And this is gonna puff up even more in the oven because it is such a light and fluffy loaf. It is just wonderful. Here we go. But it is a nice, I will say, I have a couple roll recipes and, you know, this quick challah where if I forgot to make a loaf, or I have technically a sourdough proofing in my fridge that I could have baked up, but I wanted something a little different today. This one always hits the spot, and it's so pretty. Okay, I've got my egg wash over it. You do want to make sure you get into every little kind of crevice here, because if you miss any spot, it won't be shiny there. Okay, let's give these onions a little stir because they're looking like they're getting a good sear on them. Beautiful. And then we're gonna go pop our challah in the oven and kind of bake up. Okay, so my oven is set to 400 degrees, and we're gonna bake this for about 15 minutes. So I'm gonna slide this guy in here. I do have my pot roast in here, which we are going to take out in a few minutes. Let me just get this on and rotate, because you want to cook your bread on the top rack so that it gets that nice top heat for it. So we'll have it right there. I'll set my timer for 14 minutes, so that gives me 1 minute to get my act together to get over here and grab it. But I'll be over here in just a few to take the meat out so that it can kind of sit for a second and I can get a little bit of that broth to make my gravy. Give these a good stir. And then we've got our onions. Okay, let me get our mushrooms sliced up here, because we're going to saute our mushrooms first and then our asparagus. on there because I do want the mushrooms to get a really lovely kind of, saute on them.
You have a question. What's the seasoning on the roast?
The roast, I did a really simple but delicious seasoning. So I have 2 bay leaves in there, onion powder, black pepper, garlic, salt, and rosemary. So really simple. And then I have some beef bouillon in there as well. And I sauteed up 1 whole onion, and I added in some fresh garlic that I sauteed as well. So they're a lot of your basic spices, but together they just all work really well to give you a really nice kind of a beefy roast, which I kind of really love when I'm doing a gravy with it. Now, I do a couple different variations of pot roast. Sometimes I will do like a beef bourguignon, which uses tomato paste and mirepoix and red wine. Other times I will do, this beefy one, or I'll do one with, just like a red wine, but not with a tomato base. So it just kind of changes it up depending on what I think. Sometimes I put my veggies in it, or sometimes I have it just on its own. Okay, before we pop our mushrooms in here, we're going to just saute up a little bit of garlic. So let me grab a spoonful. You could use fresh garlic if you want, but since garlic is just kind of a side piece in this dish tonight, we are going to just use our garlic. Although in my pot roast, I did use fresh garlic for that. We're gonna put in about a teaspoon of garlic, which would be about 2 to 3 cloves of fresh garlic minced up. And give this, we're gonna let that saute for just a minute or 2. You want to just keep a careful eye on it because garlic can go from being wonderful to being burnt fairly quickly. Okay, let's pull up a potato here. I'm gonna find a big fat one, and my trick is you find your biggest potato, and if your fork can go through it easily, so this guy right here looks big, that means all of your potatoes are gonna be soft. So you gotta start with your biggest one. I will say not easy enough. They need to cook a little bit longer, maybe 2-3 more minutes. I want to be able to smush it easily. If your potatoes are somewhat firm, with that, they're going to be lumpy when you cook them up or when you go to whip them. So make sure your fork can push through your biggest one because your little ones are already going to be cooked all the way, but your bigger ones might not, and those will lead to chunks in your mashed potatoes. Well, let's add in our mushrooms here, and we're gonna add a smidge more butter because the mushrooms are like sponges and I want them to get a little extra here. So about a teaspoon more of butter. There we go. And just get a nice little length. And we're gonna add our mushrooms to start sauteing up. And then we're gonna go and grab our roast out so that we can get a little bit of that broth here for it. The beautiful part about cooking our roast in our Dutch oven is that is going to stay nice and hot for a good while in there. Okay, so I'm just gonna give this a toss, and then we're gonna turn it to about a 5, and we're gonna go grab our roast. So our roast has been in for almost 3 hours-ish. So it should be nice and tender. I would say 2.5 hours. So look at our beautiful challah there. You can see it's puffing up. There we go. This thing is heavy. So I have my, get this guy up here. This is a 3-pound roast that I cut into chunks. I'll put it right here in the middle. And this is going to stay hot for a while, but we can take a quick peek of it. Beautiful. So I cut it into chunks. That's going to allow it to get tender faster as well. We used a whole onion, couple cloves of fresh garlic, 3 cups of water with beef bouillon, rosemary, 2 bay leaves, black peppers, onion powder, and a little bit of garlic salt. So you've got these wonderful flavors. I'm gonna actually ladle out some of that broth to make my gravy here in just a second. Let's get our mushrooms. There we go. I'm just trying to make sure my mushrooms can get a good saute on them. I'll lay them down. I'm not going to sprinkle them with salt yet. I like them to saute for a minute first, because once you put the salt on the mushrooms, they will start to wilt and let out their natural juices, but I like them to get a nice little sear first. Let's check our mashed potatoes here. Let's find a big guy. Let's see, he looks pretty big. And it looks like they're all pretty soft. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to strain them. And since this is a metal pot, I'm going to whip them in my pot. Let me grab my little pop-up colander.
You have a question? Did you sear the roast first?
I did. So after I sauteed my onion and garlic up, I then seared off my roast in there. And then I seared them off on all sides on a medium-high temperature. And then I took them out and I deglazed my pan with the chicken or the beef bouillon. And I added my spices in there so it can kind of get into that brothing. And then I put my roast back into that kind of broth that I made. Okay, let's get this guy over here since we don't need him on there. I'm gonna get my small pan out to make my gravy. Okay. So for our mashed potatoes, the trick is, let me grab my butter over here. You want to use room temperature butter, and you're going to just stick it, and we have a good amount of potatoes in here, so we're going to use a full stick because mashed potatoes are meant to be buttery.
Can you go over the temp and time for the roast?
So the roast, I did it at pretty much 2 temps, 350 for the majority of the time, but since my bread needs to bake at 400, I preheated it about like the last 15 or so, 10 minutes of it at 400, but 350 for, I would say, between like around 2.5 hours gives you a really tender piece of meat. Okay, we've got our butter in here. We're gonna put our cream, and we're not gonna whip it yet. We're gonna let that sit, warm up, and melt in there, and then we'll whip that here in just a second. Okay. Let's get our mushrooms are looking pretty darn good. We're gonna put a little bit of garlic salt on them now, and let them sweat out a little bit now that we've gotten a good kind of sear on them. And then we'll throw in our asparagus towards the end because we want kind of a tender crisp on it. And the mushrooms and the onions can withstand more heat than the asparagus. So we're gonna let that sit right on top. We're not gonna mix it in yet. Okay. Note to self, this is very hot, so don't grab the lid off, which is what I almost did. Okay, so here we have this beautiful broth under there. I'm gonna grab a ladle and I'm gonna start ladling it out so that I can make my gravy with this. And this is gonna have just so much flavor with it. There we go. And because, you know, when you make mashed potatoes, you've got to have gravy. Now, sometimes if you don't add enough broth in and you have like a thicker base, then you might want to dilute it, but it looks good here that I don't need to dilute it. Now, I'm not going to take all of it out. I'm going to leave, of course, a little bit in there for it to kind of sit in it and keep it nice and moist and delicious. So I took about 2 cups out because we're not making, you know, you don't need a whole lot of gravy. Put our lid on, keep it nice and hot, trap that moisture in. If you keep the lid off, it will cool down and it will dry out more. Okay. Let's get this stirred here. And now I'm gonna pop in my asparagus. And I'm just actually gonna push my mushrooms and kind of almost make a basin in here. That way my asparagus can kind of sit on the bottom of this pan and get a little bit more direct heat. And that way I don't have to do the work of taking all the mushrooms and onions out and adding them back on. So we're gonna leave them right there. I'm going to put the lid on and let them steam cook a little bit. And then we'll saute them and add a little bit of spices towards the end. But that's the nice thing about the Hexclad. They come with these great see-through lids, which is wonderful for being able to watch your food. And they have a little hole so it doesn't trap in too much moisture. Okay, we're gonna make a roux to make the base of our gravy. You don't need a lot of butter because our broth here that we took there is gonna have a bit of fat in it. So you don't wanna use too much butter because you are gonna be adding in more of fat there. And if you have too much, then it's just gonna be too thick. We're gonna start melting this over medium heat. Once it's melted, we're gonna add in our flour. And let me grab a whisk here. But while we wait for this to melt, I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of salt, and we'll give our potatoes their first whip. And since this is got a cup in my drawer, an all-metal pan, it is not a stainless or like a non-stick, it's a stainless steel. I can whip my mashed potatoes in here. If you have a non-stick pan, do not do that. And our bread should be ready in about 2 minutes, and then we can take that out. But let's get our mashed potatoes whipping up. We're gonna whip this the first time, and then I'll add in a little bit more cream. You just never know how starchy your potatoes are gonna be and how much cream you're gonna need. So I always go by how it looks. And I can tell I'm gonna need a little bit more because I want it to be a bit smoother than it is. So we've got that in there. I'm gonna add a little bit more cream. Again, we're gonna let it sit. I want it to heat up first before I whip it in. That's gonna give me a smoother, less sticky mashed potato. Okay, I've got my butter here melted. Just gonna make sure I cook the whole pan. I'm gonna turn this down even lower. We're gonna make our roux. So I'm gonna use my whisk here. And we're gonna add in about a tablespoon of flour. Because again, I'm not making a whole lot of gravy, just enough to flow for our roast and our mashed potatoes. And I'm gonna add it in, and this is gonna make a little bit of a paste here that we're gonna cook. I'm not cooking it super long. If you were making a gumbo, you would cook this over heat until your roux had a nice brown color to it. But for a gravy, especially a simple gravy, we don't need to cook it that long. Here we go. And then we're gonna take our nice liquid from our roast. We're gonna add it in little by little. Once I get a good bit in here, then we can take a quick pause and grab our challah out of the oven. Here we go. And I'm just gonna slide this off the heat for just a second because I don't want it to continue cooking, but I don't want our challah to sit too long either. Okay. Gorgeous. Look at our beautiful challah. It has this nice golden brown color. That's from the egg wash. You can always do a milk or a cream wash. That gives you a slightly lighter color, but it won't give you the shine that an egg wash gives you. But this is just gorgeous. There we go. Let that rest right there. But we've got our beautiful, it has this nice, lovely, shiny skin. We'll have a little bit of a chew to it, but it will be soft and fluffy inside. Okay. And I put my gravy right back on there. And again, we do have our recipe card for our quick challah bread. Available for everyone. You might have to do some digging because I feel like I gave it to everybody back into the spring, but we do have it. Okay, we're gonna add in a little bit more broth. Make sure you don't dump it all in at one time. You need to add it in stages because you don't want to add too much and then your gravy is too liquidy, and you need it to mix in well. You don't want to have clumps. Here we go.
You have a question? Do you do a big Thanksgiving spread?
We do a pretty big Thanksgiving shred. We have like 40 people over. So we cook 2 turkeys, but we get 3 turkeys deep fried delivered to us. They're called our pickin' turkeys, which is a strange habit that only our family does. We pick on them. It's very strange, but delicious. So they're like an appetizer turkey. And then we do mashed potatoes, rolls, gravy. I do my homemade green bean casserole. We do like a sweet potato mash, and then we have some weird things that have been on our table for decades. Peas and corn niblets. It's just a weird thing, but we always have them on there. You see our asparagus has this lovely green color to it. It's getting that nice tender, crispness to it, so they'll be tender to chew but still firm.
Does anyone help you cook?
I always get lots of help, and this is actually one of the best helps. So my sister-in-law is Irish. She's from Ireland, and she is, I swear, the world's best potato peeler. And when you have to peel 40 pounds of potato, you want one of those. And that's like my card. And I'm like, you're hired. So I do, everyone helps out a little bit. And I've actually slowly taken it away from my mom over the years. And that way she can kind of enjoy her, the kids and family, because it's the one time a year that we all get together. So her 7 kids get together. So I am the youngest of 10, but I have 6 full siblings, and then I have 3 older half brothers. So all of my full siblings and we get together every Thanksgiving. So it's pretty crazy because I have 5 kids, my sister has 5 kids, then 2 of my brothers have 3 kids. So there's so many cousins and just so much chaos. Okay, we'll get some of these nice meaty chunks in there as well. Looks like our gravy is looking fabulous. You can see the kind of the garlic in it. Add this over here. Let's season up our asparagus. We'll do one final whip on our mashed potatoes, and we should be about ready. And add a little bit extra garlic salt on here. We're gonna add a little bit of onion powder, and then a teensy bit of pepper. We'll let those kind of hydrate a little bit before we mix them in. I'm going to leave this on low. You don't want to turn the heat off on your gravy or it will curdle up and get, jelly, but low heat. And I'm going to whip it really high. Beautiful. So now we should have it. I'll take a little taste. Perfect. And let's get, it's still hot. Okay, I'm gonna toss these. Beautiful. Now with your asparagus, you wanna cook them to a bright, vibrant green, then turn off the heat. You don't wanna cook them so long that they start to turn a yellowish brown. That means they're gonna be more mushy. So look. Like our asparagus, mushrooms, and onions are perfect. We've got our pot roast over here. Now before I serve the pot roast up again, I'm going to ladle. Actually, I just kind of like to flip it all over. So if you just flip each piece of meat over and have it back in those juices, again, keeping it nice and hydrated keeps it so tender. Beautiful. Okay. Beautiful. Okay, we'll actually use this for our gravy. Got heat off. I'm going to turn this off now since we're about ready to serve. We get a spoon for our mashed potatoes. And let's check out. Beautiful. But just you can see how tender the meat is. It just pulls apart so nicely. on there, just lovely. Okay, let's serve up our dinner. Grab. Oh, hello, honey. I always have my little dogs scurrying around looking for tasty morsels. I said, they always like to plant themselves underneath the little ones. Okay, let me grab a beautiful, let me grab a bread knife to cut our bread. And then we can start serving up. So, we have, again, our beautiful soft challah. Look how soft and fluffy this is. It's just wonderful, golden brown, so soft. Made in less than an hour. So we'll have a slice of our wonderful hot, quick challah bread. We've got our creamy mashed potatoes that are made with butter, cream, and a little bit of salt. We'll add a nice chunk of our pot roast there that we cooked in our beef broth with onions, garlic, bay leaves, rosemary. And then we're gonna, of course, drizzle them both with wonderful amounts of wonderful gravy. And then, of course, you've gotta have a little bit of green. We've got our asparagus and some sauteed onions and mushrooms for a quick, easy, and delicious weeknight dinner that you can do a lot of it prepped beforehand. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page, so if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to that link, search for what we made, and you can watch and cook along with us again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. I've got my all-clad pans, my hex-clad, my Le Creuset, my baking sheets, knives, all the different cooking gadgets I use in the kitchen. I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.